What's up, gang? This week on the Itty Bitty podcast, my guest is Jessica Humphreys, and she's a dungeon master. So if you're confused about what a dungeon master is, either you're correct in your confusion or you're one of the many people getting in on the Dungeons and Dragons bandwagon. That seems to be coming back around again these days. So we talked a little bit about the game. She explained kind of what it is. We talked a little bit about it last week with my guest, Nicole. So she explained a little bit more. We are planning on doing a Halloween-themed episode each week for the month of October, finishing up with like a special D&D horror episode of the Itty Bitty podcast. So I'm pretty pumped for what we have coming up next month. If you have been digging the show, though, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. It's super important. If you like it, check it out. Make sure you do that for us. It helps us out. Also, check out the podcast Ear Floss. It's a music history podcast. And each week, Kenny brings a in-depth look at his favorite music artists with a different guest. So show them the same love that you've been showing us. It's the Ear Floss podcast. Go check them out. But anyway, this is not a podcast about our dungeon master. It's the Itty Bitty podcast. It's anything but, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Itty Bitty podcast. It's the Itty Bitty podcast. It's the Itty Bitty podcast. The Itty Bitty podcast.
All right. So you said you were pre-gaming for Halloween. We're recorded now. Sorry, we just jumped right into it.
Oh, that's cool. So I started rereading like H.P. Lovecraft, went into a little bit of Robert Louis Stevenson, a little bit of like just spooky, fun, spoopy stories.
To get you ready for the Halloween.
Absolutely.
So, welcome to the Itty Bitty podcast. I just hit the table. Welcome to the Itty Bitty podcast. This is episode 10, I think. Yeah, episode 10.
Woohoo, double digits.
Yeah. So my guest today is a friend of mine, so it's technically a buddies episode. Do you care if I say your name?
No, go for it, man.
Right.
I was already mentioned on the last one, so.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Jess Humphreys. So we talked about her last one. We're kind of teasing an episode that we have coming up at the end of October. That'll be our big Halloween finish. We're going to do Halloween-themed episodes for the Itty Bitty podcast all October. So make sure you're checking it out. And, to make sure you subscribe, rate, and review to check out all the newest episodes of the Itty Bitty podcast. But anyway, we're back into the show, back into it. So my guest is here to talk about... we're going to talk a little bit about what she does. We talked a little bit about her last episode. So you're a dungeon master.
Yeah.
And that sounds scarier than it is. If you listen to the last...
Unless you're actually the dungeon master, in which case it's completely terrifying.
Oh, okay. So I don't know what to make of that statement, but I have a feeling I'm going to learn by the end of this.
No, it's really just since it's cooperative storytelling. The dungeon master is the person who's kind of responsible for keeping everything on track.
Okay.
Which is kind of like herding cats, and you're never quite sure where they're going to go. So like you'll have this lovely story all planned out, and about 5 minutes in, someone will go, oh, hey, let's go do this instead. And then all of a sudden, all of your, hours of planning go out the window as you scramble to figure out what's going on.
Gotcha.
It's fun.
So how long have you been a dungeon master?
I started in high school.
Okay.
When I first told my family that I was interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons, my Uncle Mike from Missouri actually sent me the not the 3.5, but the third edition, all of the core rule books, and all he asked was that I never play an evil themed campaign.
Okay.
Which I still haven't done. But I played one game as a player, and then immediately jumped into DMing.
Okay, so if you've only ever done one actual game as a player.
I have played in a couple of other games, but 9 times out of 10, if a session is being run, it's being run by me.
Okay. Yeah. That means you're imaginative.
I try.
No, I remember seeing you. We used to work together. I don't really talk about work much on here, but people kind of have gathered that I work in sales. But anyway, I've seen you writing out different stories and stuff, and you commit a lot of time to spend writing these things out. Is that something you've always done?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's fun for you?
It's so much fun.
It's not tedious?
Oh God, no.
No. What's your favorite part about doing it?
So my favorite part is, as the dungeon master, my job is to provide motivation to the characters.
Okay.
And one of the ways that I do that is by knowing the villain motivation. So my fun bit is that I get to write the entire story from the villain's perspective, who is constantly getting thwarted by these... I was about to... Can I swear on this?
You can say whatever the fuck you want.
Thank God. All of these asshole heroes who keep fucking up their plans.
Right.
So my job is to figure out what the villain is doing and to plan everything around that. And so the players, as they're going through the scenarios, their job is basically to fuck up all the plans that my villain has laid down, even if they don't know that that's what's going on. So, I tend to run long-term campaigns. So, like Halloween, we're talking about a one-shot, which is a small, contained story that doesn't have necessarily anything that will ever follow after it, and is starting at a place where it doesn't really matter what came before it.
Okay.
With my current campaign, which has been running for over a year now, it is... like I've designed history that goes back 10,000 years, and all of my villains' motivations are driving to a specific point. And as of yet, a year in, the players still have no idea who the main villain is or what that character's motivations are.
After a year of playing the same game, they still don't know?
Yeah. They have continuously come across bits of the villain's plan, but have not identified that is part of the villain's plan. Okay. So I have one player who recently figured out that there is a main villain, and that this main villain is not just like, mustache twirling evil. That this villain is actually very motivated. Just has no idea in what direction this character is motivated, and still has no idea who he is.
So when you start something like that, you're a year in or so right now. Mm-hmm. Do you start from the end? Like, do you know where you're going, or do you start somewhere and then just kind of it evolves over time based on what players are doing?
I start specifically with the villain.
Okay.
So I have an end goal for the villain. And then I break down what the villain is going to have to do in order to accomplish that. And my story actually always starts with my villain having succeeded at something.
Okay.
So my villain is able to take the first step on that path. The players intersect after the villain has succeeded in their first step. So what happens is they get to see the effect of what this villain is going for, of the villain's step one.
Okay.
Without ever knowing that was necessarily, that it was the villain who caused that to happen. And so from there, they go off and follow various plot threads, whichever ones they want to. I lay down a ton of them. And at each point, the villain will make another move. And they'll either intercept it or they won't, and the villain will either succeed or he'll fail. If he succeeds, then their task gets harder, because now the villain is moving on toward his final goal. as they are intersecting the various plot lines, not every single plot line has something to do with the final villain of the campaign, but enough of them do that over time you start to kind of get a feeling that all of this is coming from one source.
Okay.
And so that's how they eventually stumble upon what the villain's goal is and then decide how they want to handle it. It is entirely possible at the end of this campaign that my players will actually side with the villain.
And they just become friends? Or allies, I should say.
It's possible. Okay. It's possible in this case.
I have a question.
I have an answer.
So since you're doing it from the perspective of a villain, and we're getting ready for Halloween, what's the most fucked up thing you've had a villain do to, like, a character or a group of characters? Because we can't just talk about regular Dungeons and Dragons here. We gotta talk about the fucked up shit.
So, in a game that I actually was a player in, a game that I was a DM in, there are multiple game systems. So one of them is called Vampire the Masquerade, and it is it's a very kind of modern Gothic setting, kind of punkish. Okay. And the characters that you're playing are all specifically designed to be on the descent. So you can start off as close to human as you can possibly be as a vampire. And as you play, you will continually do things that, like you'll start off doing something truly terrible and you'll feel terrible about it. But after a while, you do so many of them that it's just like, whatever. Yeah. And there was, I had one player who kind of kept going off the rails, and there was a werewolf incursion into the city. And so he got kidnapped, and these werewolves, again, my villains are motivated, so they had something they wanted from the city and would have an easier time getting it if he got it for them. So they tortured him until he thought he was a werewolf and actually ran into the city, and it kicked off a lot of stuff.
That's funny.
But one time I was playing, and again, Vampire the Masquerade, my character got in trouble with the higher-ups in the city, and I was confined to my room, and they would only send me kids to eat, which I refused to do.
Oh, you didn't do it?
No. I was attempting to play as decent a character as I possibly could, and then, of course, I was starved to the point where I frenzied and didn't have control of my character anymore. So that was a thing.
So did you eat the kids after you lost control of the character?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just picturing your character eating children.
Oh yeah, no, it was absolutely awful. Absolutely awful.
So I see my wife over there playing the Switch. She's probably playing The Legend of Zelda. So there's dungeons in The Legend of Zelda. So that led me thinking too, like when you're creating dungeons, have you ever modeled them after? So there's the dungeons from Legend of Zelda. What are the other popular dungeon thing, like in pop culture, would there be? Is Labyrinth technically a dungeon? Does that count as a dungeon?
It would if you were doing a Labyrinth themed game. The Labyrinth would absolutely be a dungeon.
Amy knows how I feel about that movie. I saw it too late in life. I can't remember if I've talked about this before or not. Have we talked about it before?
We haven't.
No? Are you a fan of the movie Labyrinth?
I am.
Yeah. See, I saw it as an adult, and the whole time I just was like, this guy's like a pedophile. Like, I thought of David Bowie as just this creepy, like, pedo, just trying to lure this little girl through this labyrinth.
So
did I read it wrong or what? You're pretty good at analyzing these.
So, not wrong.
Okay.
So, did you ever see the movie Legend?
Legend? No.
It's Tim Curry, Tom Cruise. It's freaking spectacular. Like it in my mind, it's basically a perfect movie.
Okay.
Both Legend and Labyrinth actually explore very, very similar ideas. Legend explores it significantly better and symbolically a lot more deeply.
Okay.
Whereas Labyrinth goes into, it kind of dips its toes into this idea and pulls back. If you look at Labyrinth as, like when the movie starts, the main character, Sarah, is, she's LARPing, which is live action role playing. She's just, dressed up.
Right.
And she's playing a fantasy game. And one quick glance at her suggests that, she's a little old to be doing this, like, completely by herself. Like, this is generally at that stage, she would be, like, with friends. Not saying there's anything wrong with fantasy games. Obviously, I'm kind of a fan.
Right. Maybe catching, like, salamanders or something. If they don't have too many friends that age.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you look at her journey through the labyrinth as kind of a maturation process. David Bowie is very, very clearly in that case, and this is speaking as one of, every single teenage girl who ever saw this movie. He is very, very much symbolic of a sexual awakening that she's not ready for. And so as she is kind of navigating these, she's navigating the labyrinth, she meets people, she establishes friendships, she establishes relationships, and David Bowie is there, Jareth is there, who is, particularly if you look at the ballroom scene where they're dancing, he is a very dangerous temptation for her. She is not mature enough to accept what he is offering. Okay. And so at the end, the sum of her maturation is actually her understanding that she is not ready for that and backing off. When she returns to her normal life, she is able to retain the kind of childlike wonder that she had at the beginning, but is taking steps into actually becoming a more adult person. But she had to realize exactly where she was in that process. So it is like, it's a solid movie with a solid idea behind it. And again, I highly doubt that was actually what they were aiming at for the story. But that
came across as not that, though.
Yeah. Well, and
you did a much better job of explaining it than I think. But I mean, I'm going to get a lot of shit for this because everybody loves this movie, but I don't know.
Well, and it's, if you in your own process of maturation reach a certain point, then the ideas of the movie no longer speak to you. Okay. And particularly if you come to it as an adult, you have already crossed that threshold. So gauging it relating to that character and gauging your own progress on that particular scale has become completely irrelevant. So you can enjoy it as, kind of the fun, campy, hey, but it's not going to speak to you the way it would if you were younger and actually, engaging in that process of maturation.
Okay. I guess I can dig that. So on to something that we both have in common that's kind of similar to Labyrinth. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I kind of feel like did Dark Crystal come out around the same time as Labyrinth?
Dark Crystal came out before Labyrinth.
Before Labyrinth?
Yeah, Dark Crystal was 1982.
82. Yeah. And when did Labyrinth come out? 88 or 89?
I want to say, 88, 89, somewhere around there.
Okay. So you've only watched a couple episodes of the Netflix one?
I have.
You can spoil it for what you've seen so far, but if you want to, but I just want to know your opinion on it so far. I watched the first episode and I thought it was cool. I mean, I haven't watched a second episode yet, but that's just because we haven't had time. So, stating my bias, hyper fangirl, Dark Crystal is my favorite movie of all time. And I think I've said this to you before, if you understand the story of the Dark Crystal, you understand why there are no more stories to actually tell in that world. That being said, if you're going to set stories in that world, they've done better than I expected them to do.
The entire show is a testament to craftsmanship. Every single aspect of the puppeteering.
Right,
the
they used all
world building.
puppets for it too, didn't they?
It's
That's
gorgeous.
nuts.
Well, I mean, Dark Crystal is still the only movie to ever feature 100% puppets with no
Right.
humans ever appearing. And they did the same thing with the TV show, and they did a phenomenal job with it.
Yeah,
It
looked really good.
In particular, the lady who voices the character of Agra, who is, again, my favorite, the original voice of Agra and the original puppeteer was Frank Oz, the same guy who did Yoda.
Right.
And to her eternal credit, this woman managed to match her voice incredibly well. She's also super young, and she's still able to sound like really like old and just like weathered, and she does an amazing job.
Did they show Agra in the first episode?
Not in the first episode. I
Okay.
think she doesn't make an appearance until the second or third.
Okay, I haven't seen that far yet. Then, yeah.
If you notice, I'm so far in all of the compliments that I've given it, I've steered away from the story.
So you weren't a fan of the story as much?
Really not.
No. Well, was it too like basic or just not enough?
No, it's not that. It's a little bit like going from like a Rembrandt to a finger painting.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with the story. It's well told. It's fine. It's just that why bother when I have the original, which is, again, my favorite movie of all time that I've spent literally 30 years thinking about, and that has kept me engaged for 30 years. Whereas this one, I'm not even engaged enough to finish the season yet.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you don't binge through a show, it's kind of...
Well, and again, it's not bad.
Right.
Like, they did way better than they had any right to do. And the voice cast is incredible. And seriously, every single person who is involved in the visuals of the story deserves awards. Like,
yeah.
every single
one.
one.
It looks amazing.
Freaking gorgeous.
Yeah. I do want to finish it. I'm going to finish it at some point. It's just, yeah, it's hard to... It's slow. It does pace very slow. But I heard there are some battle scenes that I want to see, just to see how they do them, just because I'm sure they look amazing. But yeah, I'll get through it at some point. But.
Well, and visual spectacle, a movie that I absolutely cannot stand is the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. This is not a movie that I actually enjoy, like, the story of, but I will put it on mute and just have it running because it is visually one of the most stunning things I've ever seen in my life.
What's it about?
It's about the assassination of Jesse James. So Jesse James was a, you know who he is. So in history, he was murdered by a guy named Robert Ford. And it's that story told, and I love Westerns and I love Western pacing. This one is just so slow. So slow. But again, every single frame is exquisite, like amazing.
Just the way they shot it? Okay.
The way they shot it, the way they framed everything, the color palette, absolutely everything lends itself to creating the most incredible atmosphere.
I've never heard of it. I'll have to check it out.
I recommend it.
Is it on Netflix or anything?
Oh, I have no idea.
Probably not. Maybe not. Oh.
I think I own it. If I do, I'll bring it to you.
Let me know. What I was going to say, I was going to ask you something about, as far as like the streaming comes up, are you looking forward to the Disney streaming? It's kind of off topic.
It's not.
I just haven't seen you in a while.
I honestly haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
Like, I really haven't.
It sounds pretty cool. There's like 30 plus seasons of The Simpsons. However many seasons of The Simpsons. Are you a Simpsons fan? So you get Simpsons. It's got like all the Disney stuff. So like all the Star Wars. I don't think you like Marvel stuff, do you? You're not big into that.
Never managed to get into it.
Star Wars?
Oddly, so my favorite era of Star Wars is Knights of the Old Republic.
Oh, that's right. I think we've talked. And I think So I remember we talked about when the whole Game of Thrones episode came out. I could see you like tensing up right now. You didn't like that.
Twitch.
Yeah, you hated it. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring you there.
It's okay. It's fine. I've come to terms with it.
I heard. So I think that the last time we talked, that you had thought that it was the guys who were doing what is it, Benioff? What is it?
Benioff and Weiss?
Yeah, that they were doing Knights of the Old Republic, but I had heard since then, I don't think it's them.
So I've heard kind of conflicting rumors.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard rumors that they're just flat out, that the backlash against the butcher job that they did on Game of Thrones has actually put their contract with Disney in danger.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And so they were in talks for a trilogy.
So wait, you're telling me the last season of Game of Thrones, people didn't like it?
I've heard rumors that a few people were not totally happy with, the payoff of the 8 seasons of setup.
Yeah. I've heard some of the people that have not watched it, and they're just like, yeah, to all the people that were telling me to watch it for 8 seasons. How's it feel?
This is right up there for me with Lumberjack Dexter.
Lumberjack Dexter?
So do you ever watch the show Dexter?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the end of, for some reason I was thinking of my dog, Dexter. Like, he's made an appearance on the show before, so that's why I'm like Dexter. But yes, I know what you're talking about. The end of Dexter. I actually was talking, I think after I talked to you about it last time, I had to go back and YouTube the end. Mm-hmm. And isn't he on a boat or something? And it's
he literally becomes a lumberjack.
Wait, he becomes a lumberjack?
Yeah, he just goes away. Do you know what the original intended ending was?
Mm-mm.
This is actually kind of amazing. So they changed showrunners after season 4. Seasons 1 through 4 being the absolute best of the seasons.
Ice Truck Killer was like one of the best seasons.
But his original plan for the ending was that, because you know how there's voiceover the whole time?
Mm-mm. What do you mean?
Well, so like it always starts off with Dexter talking, breaking the fourth wall, talking to the audience.
What does he say? It was he says something every time. It was something.
Oh, no. He just introduces the scene, or he introduces like what they're going to be exploring in that episode. And the original idea was actually going to be that his voiceover narration was him narrating to the audience his life as it flashed before his eyes as he was getting a lethal injection.
Mm.
So the whole thing was, because the way that the character arc was set up, the idea is that he's going to go from being someone who is a trained monster through the process of discovering what it is to be human. And at the end, he's going to have to make the decision, do I preserve myself, or do I confess to being what I am in order to save probably Deb? Because she was always set up to kind of be his conscience. And so the final scene was supposed to be that he had become fully human, in that he was able to sacrifice himself to save someone who wasn't compelled to kill.
Right.
And they just fucked that one all the way up.
Yeah. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. I always say spoiler
Don't see
alert
it.
after, but yeah.
Seriously, stop at season 5. I mean, honestly, I'm the only one who likes season 5.
Which one was that?
That was the one where they brought in, oh God, what's her name? From 10 Things I Hate About You.
Oh, Julia Stiles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the chemistry that they had honestly made up for the completely, like, totally fucked up but still ridiculous setup for that season. I mean, the fact that they named her Lumen, seriously, like Lumen to illuminate. Lumen is actually a unit of illumination.
Right.
Like, she was his light, and their arc together actually worked. Like, as soon as she had gotten her revenge, she no longer felt compelled to kill. So he, for a moment, had kind of the idea that, his dark passenger could eventually go away, which was fine thing. It was, again, it was done in a way that was ridiculous and totally over the top. But again, the chemistry of their interaction was such that for me, it carried the entire season. No one else has any reason to like it at all. It's, yeah.
Everybody has stuff that they like that other people don't like. My favorite part of was spoilers. The reason I don't say spoiler alert is because I have such a fucking tough time saying it. Jesus. Was when the dude, I can't remember who it was it Trinity? When he gets his wife, and he's just like, that was wild. That was like, oh shit.
That was, I think, one of the greatest moments in television history.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Like, John Lithgow was amazing as the Trinity Killer.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of who he was based on. But either way, he did such an amazing job. And that moment where...
Maybe BTK?
Very likely.
Because wasn't the BTK, he was like a family man,
he was a
leader
deacon.
of the Boy Scouts.
He was a deacon. He was all of that. Yeah, no, you're right. That's exactly who he was based on. Thank you. I was trying to remember.
It's All right, doesn't that make you sleep well at night, babe? That I know my serial killers so well? She loves it. I never watched this. Well, spoiler alert. Sorry, just ruined it for you. But no, yeah, BTK, that's definitely it. This is a good segue because Halloween's just right around the corner. So this is good. I feel like Dexter's a good segue into getting into all that stuff. So
Spooky.
So as far as if we're gonna do a one shot so what we're talking about, if for those who haven't caught up, is we want to do a one shot Halloween special that's going to air right around Halloween. I haven't decided if we're going to record it with video or not yet. I'll let you know in the next week or so. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a one shot basically of, I'm like looking around like I'm talking to people too. That's I'm like So we're going to do a one shot. Is it like a Dungeons and Dragons game? What would we call it?
No, this is the system that we're going to be using is Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
Okay.
Because you want to do something that is also kind of silly as opposed to like horror.
Yeah, we want to make it fun. So for those who don't know, but this isn't my world. I'm not a Dungeons and Dragons player. I've always been interested in it. I've just never done it, so I wanted to try it out, and I figured that for the first time we do it as a podcast, as a Halloween special. So I think it'll be fun, and I happen to know somebody who's a dungeon master, so we're going to kind of brainstorm and discuss some ideas for what we can do, and hopefully come up with an idea, and we'll, I don't want to give the whole thing away, so maybe we'll just kind of kick some ideas around, and then we'll kind of lock something down, and then we'll do a game for the end of the month.
For those of you out there who are going, hey, Dread would be a better Halloween game. Actual serious horror games are not what you ever want to try to start with, because generally speaking, when you first start to learn how to play role-playing games, you feel like an idiot because you're sitting around with a bunch of your friends and you're pretending to be other people, and your reactions aren't supposed to be yours. They're supposed to be the reactions of the people that you've created.
Okay.
And you will look like an idiot.
Oh, I do that all the time.
But it's one of those you embrace that. It's just the more that you're willing to get into it, the better.
Okay. But
it's significantly easier to feel like an idiot when you're playing a game that's designed to be kind of fun and silly, as opposed to when you're playing a game that's actually supposed to scare you,
right? Or
that you're supposed to be acting like your character is scared. It's significantly more difficult than people actually realize to play that kind of a game.
Okay.
So
this
one is going to be mostly lighthearted with some spoopy stuff thrown in there just for the fun of it.
I was going to ask you because the idea that I had, and it was just one idea of many, and you can kind of take this as whatever you will. Have you ever seen the movie Cabin in the Woods?
Yes.
So that idea that like, I can't really remember the entire ending. You probably remember better than I do. But wasn't it like these guys were basically controlling all these different events that were like, one was zombies, one was, creatures from the night, one was like...
Oh, they had hundreds.
Yeah.
They had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah. So something like I like that kind of story, like where it's like all these different kind of genre bending. But I don't know if something like that would be too hard to do. But. So
that would actually be more of, that would be a setting that would draw out for a campaign. Like I said, what I'm thinking is kind of a sort of almost cartoon noir-esque murder mystery.
Okay, explain.
The noir genre is now kind of ridiculous in the best possible way. It's Sam Spade, dark and gritty, as you have the aging detective who has a drinking problem, and he's just out for one last, he's going to find out who killed his brother or something like that. But introducing fantastical elements like vampires and werewolves and all kinds of fun stuff. It'll be like, I still have a lot of fleshing out to do to figure out exactly like how it's going to work. But that way you guys have a specific thing that you will be doing. The problem with there being so many different options of, oh, hey, if I pick this happens, or I pick this happens, is that, one, you're likely to die fast.
Right.
Which is always frustrating for people. And the other one is that with a one shot, you need concise parameters to function in, and particularly since it's your first game, that way we can keep the mechanics as light as possible.
Okay.
While you guys are still able to play around and have fun. Like I'll do the entire town. Like I'll have a map for you guys, so that you guys can, make your way through the town, picking up clues, figuring out what's going on, with a little bit of a backstory, so that it's directed enough that you kind of know exactly what you're doing.
Okay.
And again, it will lend you to not dying quite as quickly.
So now, once you die, are you dead? That's it. You're done. You can't come back ever.
At the level that you guys will be playing at, no.
No.
Yeah.
You can't come back and come after you.
It depends on how you die.
Okay.
My goal will not be to kill you guys off, but there's always a possibility.
Okay. And now, so I'm assuming you would start with a villain.
Always.
Same way.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any I guess you couldn't tell us who
I can tell you that
I
I do. I absolutely know who the central villain is, and I absolutely know what they want.
Okay. I'm trying to see what I can ask you without giving too much away of your story.
Oh, go ahead and ask anything, and I'll just tell you whether or not I can answer.
So, I guess we're going to create our characters after this podcast. Me and my wife Amy will create our characters for the show. And so, once we have our characters,
mm-hmm.
we'll have I'm assuming a jumping off point
mm-hmm.
that we'll have to start at. And so, okay. So we've got our characters.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get our jumping off point.
Yep.
Where is this good world going to be set? Like, is it going to be current? Is it going to be...
No, it's probably going to be set in kind of generic fantasy time, where I'm able to kind of bring in, if I want, I can bring in Magitech. I can bring in, basically, this is going to be low technology, so everyone is still primarily fighting with swords and knives and stuff like that.
Okay. What was that? You said something.
Can I be a dragon queen?
A dragon queen? You want a chance at doing Game of Thrones better than they did? Yeah.
I mean, literally anything would be better. I mean, you can, if you want, you can play as a dragonborn, so you can literally be descended from dragons, and you can certainly have a goal of becoming a queen. I got no problem with that.
Okay. So we've got. I'm just trying to get a sense of the story. So we're set in a generic fantasy time.
Generic fantasy time. You are the way that I want to set this up again, just to make it easier for you guys, because again, first time you've ever played, so a little bit of kind of assistance is nice. Basically, there was in the town that you're in, there was for a while you've had kind of a war going on between the more humanoid sort of races, and nasty ghoulies and vampires and stuff like that. And recently, they finally came to a concordance.
Okay.
Basically, a truce has been signed.
Okay.
Which is great for everybody, but really terrible for you. Because you guys are adventurers, and if you can't go out and you can't slay all of these ghoulies and ghosties, you're pretty much out of a damn job.
Ooh, so are we doing like fantasy horror?
Kinda, yeah.
Ooh.
So basically,
it's like
you guys...
fantasy horror noir?
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's my goal.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. Well, and basically, you guys have set up shop in the basement of a tavern, because it's all you can freaking afford at this point. And you are basically mercenaries. You're kind of an adventuring party for hire. And mainly right now, you guys are kind of just drinking away your rent, hoping that somebody's going to come by and offer you a damn job.
Are we actually going to be drinking?
I assume you'll probably have a few drinks, yeah.
Oh, all right.
I do request mostly sobriety.
I won't get hammered. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done one or two podcasts. There's one on there that we got drunk for. And yeah, it's too hard. You can like have a couple and start drinking, but if it's like starting it after having a couple drinks, it's no bueno. So I found that's not conducive for podcasting, but we can start. So as soon as we start, we'll pace ourselves, and we'll do like wine or something. We'll do like wine out of a goblet or some shit. We'll do it.
I'll bring my DM cup.
Yeah. So
like a leather wrapped tankard.
I'm excited. I've always liked like Halloween themed stuff, so this is going to be real fun. Fantasy horror, that's going to be... I didn't realize that's like what you were heading towards. I thought it was going to be... Okay. So I'm trying to think what else I can ask you about the game. Is there anything else you can tell me about it without giving too much away? Like, what are we going to start with as far as... Are we going to have our own weapons? Are we going to have to get weapons? Are we gonna have to...
So during the character creation process, basically what you're going to do is you're going to select a race to be part of.
Okay.
So human, elf, dwarf, these are the most common.
Okay.
But since this is a one-shot, barring a few exceptions, I'm pretty much going to allow you guys to go sort of hog wild on this one.
Okay.
There are a few that I draw the line, absolutely not. But you're going to pick one of those. And then you're going to pick a character class. Your character class is kind of like your job. So it is a set of skills that you are better at than other people who are not trained in that class. So you can be a fighter if you just like to bash things. You can be a wizard if you want to, have a complicated way of casting lots and lots and lots of spells. Basically a glass cannon. You die quick, but you boom well.
Okay.
You can pick, like they have, if you want to be like sneaky, you can do rogue. If you want to, shoot things from afar, you can be ranger. And all of these different classes have like a bunch of different variations in them. So it's actually very highly customizable. And from there, what we're going to do is we're going to work on kind of a personality and a backstory. How did your character end up as part of this out-of-work adventuring group in this tavern? And what is it that, how would you react to things? Okay. And so then what we'll do is when we meet up, you guys will have character sheets. Okay. Character sheets are basically, it's a tabulation of various statistics that tell you what you're good at and what you're not so good at. So most of the game, this is a D20 based system. So the primary, you roll dice to figure out how you do things. And the primary die has 20 sides on it. And when you roll that, that determines how well you do at something. But if you're trained in something, you will have a modifier that you get to add. If you're bad at something, a modifier that you'll have to subtract to whatever that D20 roll is.
Okay.
And then as the DM, I set a difficulty, basically a threshold that you have to either meet or exceed in order to be successful in what you're trying to do. So if you want to, like, if you come across a ravine that's, 10 feet wide and you want to jump over it, I'll say, okay, cool, roll athletics.
Okay.
So you'll take a 20-sided die, roll it. You'll go onto your sheet, go down your skills. Oh, my athletic skill is a +3. So as you roll, you add 3 to the result. And then if that result meets or exceeds the difficulty rating that I've set for jumping 10 feet over this ravine, you will succeed. But you've already jumped.
Okay.
So if you roll under that, you still jumped.
But you don't necessarily make it.
But you didn't make it to the other side. And depending on how badly you fail, you either mid-jump, Wile E. Coyote, yahoo, or you might have the opportunity to try, like you didn't land on the other side, but you might have the opportunity to try to grab for the edge and prevent yourself from, falling down the cliff.
Can you get like fucking paralyzed and stuck at the bottom of a ravine or some shit?
Oh, yeah.
And then have to be stuck?
Well, generally speaking, and this is one of the reasons why you play with a group, is that you have a party, and that party is going to help you. Now, if you fall and you go splat, there's not much they're going to be able to do. But, if it's only like 10 feet deep, then, they'll lower a rope down and haul your ass out.
And brand the broken you, let's bring
Absolutely. Just, build a nice little palanquin to like carry you to the next part of the adventure.
Yeah. And then, spoiler alert, at the end, you're king. So,
That's absolutely how that works.
Yeah.
You get paralyzed, you become king.
Yep. That's exactly how it happened.
I mean, those are like the basic mechanics of the game. And then depending, again, on what job you choose, you will have abilities to affect the situation more. So, I mean, if you're a fighter and you want to play as simple as possible, the 3 easiest classes to play, are Monk, because all you do is punch things. Barbarian, because you get mad and then you hit things with an axe.
Wait, why does the monk punch things?
Because the monk is a martial artist.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you take monk up to like later levels, you can become the freaking avatar. You can basically become shadows. You can, there's all kinds of stuff that you eventually are able to do. But your basic monk is actually an incredibly easy character to play. It is not a class that I favor, but that's just because that's a me thing. It's actually really well written, really well balanced. Something like a barbarian, their main ability is literally called rage. So you get super pissed off, and you go at things with an axe, and you don't stop chopping until either you're dead or whatever you're chopping is dead. When you rage, you actually take less damage from different types of damage just because you feel no pain because you're so pissed off.
Right. Got that adrenaline going.
Oh, yeah. And then as something like a fighter, you hit things. But you get to be... They're all tactical, depending on how you play them. The fighter is someone who's supposed to be kind of trained in martial skill. So they tend to be a little bit less run forward and hit things and more, what is the best way for me to run forward and hit things?
A little bit more critical thinking.
Yeah.
So when you play a game, do you need to can everybody be have the same job, or does everybody have to does everybody have to have a different job?
Oh, no, you can play like a monoclass group.
Okay. It
does mean that you are going to, and again, because all of the classes have so much variation in them and because they're so customizable. So let's say that everyone decided to be a rogue, because rogue is a super popular class. Everyone likes, sneaky, stabby. You can have one who is a mastermind, who is basically a face character. They are extremely good at talking to people, at finding things out, at manipulating. Then you can have an assassin who does stupid amounts of damage, and that's what they do. They're like they're your, hey, I'll take this thing down in one shot kind of character. And then you can have one who's an arcane trickster who does the rogue stuff, but also has magic. So you can absolutely have everybody play one class and get enough variation to where you have most of your bases covered. It does tend to be more fun if everybody is playing, if everybody has their own specialization, because then everybody doesn't necessarily have to play one way and you have more bases covered.
All right. I can kind of dig that. Yeah. So we're going to do Halloween. So is it going to be, okay, I want to try to do this without, let me ask, I want to do like one more question about this because I want to keep it like as much as we can. So
I promise I will tell you nothing of substance.
All right. So we're going to keep it in the fantasy horror. We already know that. We're going to keep it in, it's going to be a generic fantasy time. Okay. I'm trying to think of what else we can ask. We've already asked about weaponry. We've already asked about... Ooh, what about, like, what do we start with as far as goods? Like, what do we do? Do we just, like, do we use currency? Do we have resources? That type of thing?
So if we were starting at, like, level 1,
okay,
you would have a certain amount of money, and you would have starting equipment. So the game will assign you basically, hey, you get to pick from this list of things to just have, like given as a freebie, just because you're starting out as an adventurer. If you already have one level, that means that you have done enough that you have at least basic equipment. We're going to start a little bit higher than that, mainly so that I can throw more fun stuff at you without you guys just croaking. And so basically what we'll end up doing is as we go through character creation, you'll get to shop. So you'll have some things that are available to you and you'll have some things that you might be able to find along the way.
Okay. Ooh, I like that.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Everything.
Anything else you can tell us about it without giving too much away? Because we can move on from... Because I just want to tease this. I don't want to, because we're going to be going into this game, so I don't want to give too much away about it. Just let people know kind of what it's about and what we're going to do. It's going to be a special one-off episode of the Itty Bitty podcast.
Super looking forward to this. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm going to be telling... it'll be the end of October, so it's going to be the last week of October that it comes out. I don't know if we're going to record it that week or not, but we have plenty of time to figure out when we're going to record it. We'll do that after this to kind of lock it down, but we're going to be doing that one-off Halloween episode where we're basically going to be running is it Dungeons and Dragons game? I keep asking that, but that's what we're going to call it.
No, well, this one is actually, the system that we're using is going to be Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
And then do you have a title for it? That's what the other thing I was going to ask you.
I don't have one yet, but I am working on it.
Okay. You can tell me what you're brainstorming after. We'll release it later. Right. Okay, so anything else about it before we move on to the next?
Honestly, pretty much everything beyond that is more just a description of the game itself, the mechanics, how it works, which is relatively dry until you've seen it actually in action. So that one's more fun to kind of discover along the way.
Okay, sweet. I'm excited. So, as far as fantasy horror goes, where do you draw your inspiration with?
So I like Lovecraft, like everyone who has ever liked horror in any way, shape, or form. But when it comes to doing something that isn't like horror inspired, I have kind of an absurdist sense of humor. So I just thought that I had kind of one idea that just seemed completely ridiculous to me, but that fits into that. And that one I can't go into quite as much because that would be part of the story. But but essentially I like to take two very dissimilar ideas and figure out how to shove them together.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of an example that isn't the example that I'm using for the story. So I have a different story that I'm writing, and it deals a lot with like religious themes and stuff like that. And it starts, the first line of the story is literally a priest and a plastic surgeon walk into a bar, which I did not realize was a joke until after I'd written it. I was just describing what happened. How did you not realize
that was you just wrote it down?
Yeah, I just wrote it down, and then all of a sudden, boom. I have another story that starts off with, it all began the day my father fired our wizard and bought a tractor.
And you didn't realize? Did you realize it, or did somebody say, "Hey, that's like the beginning of a joke"?
No, it was. After I wrote it down, I'm like, oh my god, that's exactly what that is. Okay.
Did you leave it?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
it's a great way to start a story.
Yeah.
But it's just taking different ideas from wildly different kinds of things that you would not normally associate, and throwing them together and figuring out how they could work.
Nice.
Like I said, the one story that starts off with the father firing the wizard is a fantasy western about the rise of technology replacing magic, but how that's not necessarily a bad thing.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, so the idea, like, human beings are really, really good at making things that we've always considered to be magic. Like, if you want to fly, like, it's, everyone's like, oh, hey, I'd love to have wings. Well, yeah, that's fine. But our workaround is we got planes. Like, that's pretty magic. Anything that we've ever wanted to accomplish by magic, we've done a much better job accomplishing through technology. And there are a lot of stories out there about how the rise of technology kills magic and how it's super sad. And I wanted to write a story about how the rise of technology replaces magic in a way that makes it more widely available and improves everybody's life.
That's actually a really dope story, though.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm working on it.
Technology, because you don't really think, like, what if technology, because you, like, technology is eventually gonna, like, replace people, robots.
We are headed toward that singularity.
But you never think about, like, what would happen to Harry Potter if fucking technology, Harry Potter's out of a job, Well, and one of the things, and this is actually one of the things I think that the movies did that did a disservice to the imagination of the books, is that they just made wands guns. Oh no, I just meant like in because of the way that. Sorry, I could just confuse myself. Never mind.
But as an idea, like, everyone has a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
A cell phone is telepathy. It is instantaneous communication over vast distances. Right. Like, that's freaking fantastic. Like, that's amazing.
So you wouldn't need a spell. You just immediately, yeah.
I don't need to cast, telepathy on you. I can just dial your freaking number and call. It's way cheaper.
Such a really cool concept.
Thanks.
All right. So the other thing I was going to ask you, sorry, I distracted myself.
No, you're good.
Is there so you're dungeon master, you create this takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. I appreciate you doing it.
It is a joy for me.
Is there a market for that? Like, is there a place where you can, like, Fiverr? Are there people that are looking for dungeon masters?
So, yes.
Have you ever thought about doing that?
I'm not good enough yet to do that.
No?
I would put myself at fair to middling.
Okay, you're good enough for the Itty Bitty podcast.
Which actually means that I'm much better than I think I am. No, it's... So you have places like Fantasy Grounds, which is an online... it's basically an online forum where people can host games remotely. So if you can't find a group where you're at, but you still want to play, you can play with people literally all over the world.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And there are some people who will run, basically like, hey, I will DM for you, and this is what it costs to have me DM for you. Most people just do it for free. But some people, like, they'll do podcasts of it. With the rise of Critical Role and the kind of renaissance of role-playing games that we're having right now, there's a much bigger market out there, and there are people who are legitimately good enough that, yeah, that's a thing that they can do. It's there's also an online resource called DM's Guild, where they allow people to publish their own homebrew stuff. So if I make a setting, or if I make a series of maps, or a series of items, story hooks, things like that, I can publish it on there either at a set cost or just say, hey, whatever you feel like paying, and then I get some of that. So
Okay.
is it possible to DM professionally? Yes. But you need to build up a decent sized audience before that becomes a thing that
Becomes something you can do full time. Well, I just was wondering. I have never thought about that being like a lane, but it certainly would be something that you could definitely get into, I would imagine.
Oh yeah. Well, again, like there's a show called Critical Role,
Mm-hmm.
which started off on the YouTube channel Geek and Sundry, and on Twitch. So it was live, and it is headed by, the DM is Matthew Mercer, and everybody on the show, all of the players, are professional voice actors who have been friends for years. And their episodes run from 3 to, I think their longest one is a little over 5.5 hours. And it is a legitimate phenomenon. It took off, like originally when they started playing, they had a home game and they just moved their home game onto Twitch. And they were like, yeah, no one's going to watch this. This is idiotic. And they recently set a world record for their Kickstarter. They are like, hey, we finished our first campaign. We're quite a few episodes into our second campaign. We love our original characters, and we would like to do an animated, because they do voice acting for animation.
Mm-hmm.
So like, we would love to do like an animated, not series, but like an animated special. So they're like, hey, we've talked to a ton of companies and none of them are willing to back us. So we're going to set a Kickstarter goal of $750,000, just so that we can do an animated special. It's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to be a story that was told pre-stream, at our home game. And, if we'll make up stretch goals as we go along, if we happen to beat $750,000. I think in the first hour they hit 2 million.
Ooh.
And over the entire course of the campaign, of the Kickstarter campaign, they raised over 11 million.
It's a lot of money.
It's insane.
Have you ever thought about doing a podcast?
Oh yeah, I think that would be fun.
Yeah.
Like, this is kind of cool. Like,
Yeah,
this
it's
is
not
super fun.
hard. I mean, everybody thinks it's hard. You just got to get some equipment and,
Actually do it.
Yeah, I mean,
It's the biggest one.
consistency.
Yeah.
We've just I've been doing them every Tuesday. So as long as you stay on top of it, I mean, not everyone's a winner. They're not all like, you'll get better at it, but it's all about getting comfortable and shit too. It took me a little while to get comfortable with just talking on the mic and like, doing it in front of Amy over there, who's like lost in Breath of the Wild. So she doesn't even care. She's
It's a
over
good
there.
place to be lost.
Yeah. So, yeah, we just went to Comic-Con recently. There was all the
that's so cool.
cosplayers, the Rose City Comic-Con. So that was fun. Oh, shit. What was I going to ask you? So, oh, yeah, I do remember. What is what's the most disturbing game that you've ever, like, come across?
So there is an RPG system, and I'm racking my brains right now to remember what it's actually called. Not that anyone should ever look it up, but I'll remember what it's called, obviously, as soon as we get off the mic. But there is actually a game system out there where you can accidentally rape someone to death.
You can accidentally rape them to death?
Yes.
How do you accidentally rape? Well,
it's part of the game system where you can accidentally do that. Yeah, no, it's not a popular system, obviously. No. One of the things that I have with my home game is I pretty much allow my players free reign. Like, I don't railroad. You get to do what you want to do. Like, if you're doing something very obviously very stupid, I might just kick in, hey, are you sure you want to do that?
Okay,
it's
so
like,
that's like the signal.
It's just like, it's like, hey, you know, this is one of those things that maybe you want to reconsider. But if you go ahead with it, like, sure, that's your gig. But I do, this is going to sound ridiculous, but my group actually has a safe word. So because I let them do anything, I'm like, hey, if someone makes a decision that actually makes someone uncomfortable, or they want to engage in something that really freaks someone out, because again, I've played like Vampire the Masquerade, so I've played where like you can do some really fucked up shit.
Ooh, I want to do some really fucked up shit.
But I told my players, I'm like, okay, if this makes you uncomfortable, and this came up because early on in the game, my players needed to get information out of this character and had decided to torture her to get that information. I'm like, okay, I will run anything that you want me to run. It's like, but this is one of those things that you can get super uncomfortable for people depending on like how dark you guys decide to go with it. It's like, so I'm like, hey, if anyone says, you know, you guys pick a word, and if someone says that, this stops, like we fade to black. It's like, because again, people can get like, particularly if you play long term, you get really invested in your character. Like they matter to you. And when really, really fucked up shit happens to them, sometimes it's like a lot. Like, it sounds ridiculous if you've never played.
Well, no, if you're spending time on it, I can see why, you know.
Nicole, who was on last time.
The meme machine.
The meme machine. She does have a really amazing meme game. But she is actually the only person in my current campaign who has literally been playing since level 1.
Damn.
Everybody else came in at later levels. And her character, like, has become a really big deal for her, which I love. It's fantastic. And so, like, if something really terrible were to happen to that character, like, she'd probably need a minute. Like, they were going into a major fight, like a month or two ago, and she and her new husband were so freaked out that they made backup characters, figuring that they were going to die. But we're super sad about it.
So I think I asked her this question too, but you might know better than she would. So I had heard, I can't remember where I had heard it, but back in the day when people would play, and it was like one of those things where
Satanic Panic.
Well, that, and it was like, you know, it was something that was considered, you know, it was considered evil, all that stuff. But did people actually drop acid and play it like I had heard?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They did?
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
be fucking fun. I guess that would be
It would. I've never tried acid, so I have no idea what would happen. I don't think that would be good for me.
Well, you're the one who would have to keep it together.
Yeah.
So but I feel like back in the day, everybody would probably, like, the dungeon master probably did it too.
Oh, it was funny. So when I was a teenager, I was actually playing in the park with a couple of my friends, and this guy came over drunk off his ass. And he comes up to us and he holds up a little picture of his daughter, and he goes, "This is no good. You don't. You be like her. You be righteous. You be like her, my daughter." And we're like, we're playing as good guys. Like, we're fighting bad guys. And then when I was I had a campaign that I ran before this that also lasted about a year, and I was stopping in at the dollar store to pick up stuff to craft something out of. And so he's like, "Oh, why are you getting these things?" I'm like, "Oh, it's props for a game of Dungeons and Dragons." Isn't that like satanic?
El Diablo.
and I explained, no. I said, first, she's like, "Well, there are demons in it." It's like, yeah, but they're generally the bad guys.
Right.
And it's like, I generally speaking, my players are like, if there's going to be demons, my players are going to be fighting them.
Yeah.
And it's like they're, and she's like, "I just don't understand." So I took a couple of minutes and I explained that this is literally just cooperative storytelling. I'm like, pretend you're in your house. You hear a knock at the front door. What do you want to do? He's like, well, I want to go answer it. I'm like, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons. Good job.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
It's like that is all that it is. But yeah, the Satanic Panic was a big deal. And yes, lots of people have played very high.
I mean, it would make you get more invested in the world. It'd be like on another level. I don't know how coordinated you'd be, depending on how much you took.
I don't know. I did have an entire campaign derailed because one of my players got so drunk that she decided to make a move which essentially ended with the entire party dying. Like, she TPK'd the entire group because she was way too drunk for literally the entire table is yelling at her, don't do that. And she does. And like, okay, well, you guys are all dead because you just pissed off the final boss of the entire campaign and you are not strong enough to fight him.
And then she passed out.
Probably, yeah.
All right, well, I think we're getting about where I wanted to get with the interview. I just wanted to tease that upcoming episode. So like I said, we're going to do a Halloween themed episode. We're going to tease it a little bit more as it gets closer to it. We're going to create our characters today. So once we have our characters created, I'll figure out a good way to announce my character's name or something. So
it'll be fun.
Do you have anything that you want to plug while you're on here? I mean, I don't have too many subscribers, but there's a couple of them. Shout out to my subscribers who are still listening.
I don't, but I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, if you end up doing your own podcast, let me know and I'll put you on and plug you on here. So
much appreciated, man.
So thanks for tuning in for another episode. And then I think after this one, it'll start our Halloween themed episode. So we're going to get into the month of October. So if you're into that, tune in. We'll keep it fun for everyone, but with different topics like we always do with the Itty Bitty podcast. But anyway, Jess, thanks for coming on. Peace.
It was a pleasure.
Later. All right, as always, thank you for checking out the Itty Bitty podcast. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review if you're digging the show. Check us out on Instagram, Itty Bitty Podcast, on Twitter at Itty Bitty PCast. We just started a new Facebook group, so check that out. If you want to join it, check it out. Search for Itty Bitty Podcast, and it'll come up with the group and page and all that stuff. So make sure you check that out, and check us out on ittybittypodcast.com. You can check out our other show, Choice Nugs Only, there as well. We'll be back next week for another episode. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace.